This is good shit.
Welcome back, faithful viewers of mine. Today I'm talking about one of my favorite slashers, Scream. Now I know what you're thinking. Logan, weren't you gonna review Scream 6? Why are you reviewing the first one and not the one that just came out the other day? Well, I'm glad you asked. On the way to go see Scream 6, my fucking car broke down and I was unable to attend the movie. I'm a little annoyed about the fact that I still wanted to get a video out on the whole Scream topic because I wanted to talk about Scream 6 and possibly get a ranking video out. See, the problem with that is I haven't been able to see Scream 6 to do said ranking. My plan got a little bit fucked. So I decided to go back to the roots of this franchise and just talk about the first one. Released back in 1996, the original Scream revitalized horror for many people and the genre in general. The problem with horror movies back in the 90s is, around this time a lot of classic horror icons were dumbed down and caricatures of who they used to be. Their movies went from being scary slashers to goofy, almost parodies of what they used to be.
Now I'm playing with power.
Scream, however, was one of the first films that brought scares back into these movies. In recent years, we've seen a lot of these characters redone again and rebooted for newer franchises. Or a lot of times studios would revitalize an entire series and just cut all the stupid fucking movies out of it. One thing I'll give the Scream franchise credit for, though, is although the movies get a little bit corny, they never really get bad. And with this one being the original, I will say it is definitely one of the best ones. And also my favorite of the franchise. Although it has really great commentary on the horror genre, it also has great commentary on movies in general. I love the parts of the film where the characters are like, no, Sid, this is real life. This isn't a movie. Because it plays off of classic horror movie tropes. I really think this film does a great job at dissecting the genre and proving how a lot of these tropes can be stupid and dumb while also still doing the tropes in a realistic way. I think that's really impressive. I also just think the overall meta-commentary on horror films while also being in a horror film is something really cool that only this movie pulls off really well. The rest of the Scream franchise tries to do it in every movie in its own little way, where they have their random movie scene where they talk about a bunch of movies and how the movie they're in is like a movie. And at this point, it's become a trope of the Scream franchise to do that, and I really only think it's done well in the first one. Sometimes the conversations about that stuff in general in these films can get really dumb, but the first one is the only one that does it in a not overly corny way. Especially because when this movie came out, there wasn't many films where people were just spitting random ass references to other films and TV. I love that in the Scream universe, the only thing this world doesn't have is Scream movies. And even then, it has the entire Stab franchise, which is based off of the real life events in their own story. The characters don't want to do obvious horror movie shit, so they try to use that as a guide to help them throughout random and wacky scenarios where they almost fucking die. And I personally think the first one does it the best because it's not the center focus of what's going on, it's just something to be mindful of. The Scream franchise has so many amazing characters, and I've grown to love them so much throughout watching all of these movies. And as an introduction to the franchise, it does an amazing job showing who these characters really are at heart. Sidney Prescott is a fucking badass that is not to be trifled with. She has almost died in nearly every single one of these movies, and she still always comes out on top. I also loved finding out in the first one that she's not a fan of horror movies, not because she's scared, but because she thinks they're fucking stupid. She doesn't understand why the characters can't make smart decisions, and when you're making a horror movie where the character realizes that people in horror movies are stupid, then it makes our character smarter than them. And it shows that we actually have a competent lead to face off our killer. She's a really interesting character to follow because she doesn't get put down easily. She is always fighting our killer. We also have all of the other lovable characters like Deputy Dewey and the introduction of Gale Weathers. Characters that you might not have really given a shit about before are introduced here, and you end up loving them even more in the first one after seeing who they become throughout the franchise. I genuinely think Dewey is my favorite Scream character. This guy is a sitcom character living through the events of his sister and multiple other people being murdered. He is the most incompetent cop I have ever seen in anything. I want somebody to tell me how Dewey has a fucking gun in every single one of these movies, and every single time it is knocked out of his hand. He's a great character and a lovable goofball, and I love him to death. And the introduction of Gale Weathers as one of the bitchiest characters I've ever seen on screen to then become one of my favorite throughout the series. She starts caring about people and stops caring just about the story, which is why all the other characters, like hated her in the beginning. She was just this bitch who was trying to get the inside scoop so she could become famous. I really like the way all the characters characters were connected and involved with each other throughout this film too. It's hard to suspect who Ghostface might be because, you know, all of Sid's friends are kind of assholes, besides like Tatum and maybe Randy. But in the first one, Randy's kind of a dick too, so it doesn't matter, and it kind of happens to be that she goes to school with a bunch of pieces of shit too. It also doesn't help that her mother's reputation has lingered over her for her entire life, and instead of dealing with that, she's kind of just suppressed it all. So when these murders start happening, not only is there no one she can trust, there's no one she can turn to for genuine comfort besides like Tatum. And Tatum's a good best friend. Well, she was. Now, although this is gonna sound kind of stupid, when I was a young lad, I saw Scary Movie many times. I didn't realize the problem with that was watching Scream after Scary Movie is like watching the serious version of Scary Movie. Now, I know that literally everybody else who saw Scream before Scary Movie, it's the exact opposite. The problem with this scenario is the twist of Scream was kind of spoiled for me. But I just want to say that even though I already knew who was behind the Ghostface murders, it didn't make the reveal any less terrifying. I'm not a big fan of Stu or Billy throughout most of this movie. I mean, hell, when I watched it for the first time, I thought Billy was this weird-ass creep where if he wasn't the killer, he was doing a really shitty job at proving that it wasn't him because he just sounded creepy anyway, and he was a really weird fucking guy. Stu is overly obnoxious, an asshole, and I can't stand him at all. But finding out that they're actually sick fucks who just want to ruin this girl's life makes them redeemable characters. Finding out that Billy is this crazed fucking psychopath who blames Sid for the loss of his mother is pretty solid motivation, and I think it makes everything in this whole movie so cool. I love the fact that they fuck with Sid and gaslight her to crazy degrees for her to then believe and then not believe that Billy's the killer. And rewatching the film, knowing that they are the killers, makes it kind of disturbing seeing them fuck with all these people for the whole movie. Now, although Billy's running the operation, Stu is definitely my favorite out of the two killers. Matthew Lillard has been one of my favorite actors since I was very little, and I like seeing him in literally anything he gets to be put in. And I think it's funny that throughout most of this movie, I couldn't fucking stand him until the end. Because as soon as you find out he's a crazed lunatic too who just kind of likes killing people, because I don't think Stu really has motivation besides that he might be like kind of in love with Billy, but I'm not entirely sure. He just seems like this weird, out of place, wacky guy who happened to like killing people, and he fit into this plan and movie really well. Knowing he's just a piece of shit asshole murderer makes him a lot less annoying, because I just know who he is already. And it makes me not think, man, this guy could be better, because he literally can. I also think Stu has some of the best lines in the entire film.
What's your motive? Billy's got one. The police are on their way. What are you gonna tell them?
Peer pressure. I'm far too sensitive.
I also overall just think that Ghostface is a really cool concept character for this whole series because it's somebody new every movie, and that's something that no other slasher really has. Every time it's just like, Michael Myers is this regular guy who happened to go fucking crazy and start killing people. Why is he immune to fire? Why is he immune to the concept of death? Fuck it. And that's our answer. Now, although Ghostface can sometimes randomly teleport, apparently, because I don't know how the fuck he gets out of these people's visions sometimes, he's a pretty grounded character. I also think in this first movie especially, he has just enough spookiness and campiness to go with the character. I love watching Ghostface get the shit beat out of him throughout the whole first movie. It is the funniest thing in the world. And on a small note, the kills and gore in this film are top-notch. Especially for a movie that came out in the 90s, I was expecting some weird effects, but genuinely, it all looks so cool. I love when practical effects are used for horror because seeing how they're made is also so interesting, and I always thought it was one of the coolest parts of any movie in general was seeing how the practical effects were used to make something unbelievable. And this movie does a great job at that. Like, I think Tatum's death scene is a prime example of, wow, that was really fucking sick and done practically. And I love seeing how they did it. There aren't a lot of things I dislike from the first Scream. There really aren't a lot of things I dislike from this whole franchise. I also liked Billy admitting why he killed Sydney's mom, because originally when he was like, I'm the killer, and I killed your fucking mom, I was like, why'd you do that? That's stupid. But when he explained it, I understood, and I wasn't upset about that anymore. I love almost everything about the first Scream movie, and I genuinely think it's one of my favorite horror movies ever. And as I've said, it's definitely my favorite slasher. I love the way it plays off of classic horror tropes and has commentary on the whole genre in general. It does it really well, and it's really impressive how the film pulls it off. Without further ado, I think I'm gonna give the first Scream a 9 out of 10. I think I just like this one the best for setting up the entire franchise. If we didn't have this film, we wouldn't have the sequels we enjoy. So, thank you, Scream 1. If you like this video, consider subscribing. I would love to get a video out on Scream 6 next week, and I'd like to get a ranking video out on all the different movies. I would love to talk about this series some more because I think there's more things to talk about, because I can't sum up my love for this whole franchise just talking about the first film, because it goes far beyond that. So if you're interested in seeing more Scream videos, you should totally stick around. I also have a review playlist full of different movie and TV show reviews if you're interested. So as always, like, comment, and save Norbert now. Goodbye, guys.